A very good evening and a warm welcome to all our viewers to yet another spectacular episode on airport planning and development. I hope you all had an amazing session yesterday. Let us find out what we have today in store for us to learn. Armstrong Sealing Solutions presents Airport Planning and Development. Today we are going to have two case studies on the Hyderabad Airport and the Bangalore Airport. Case study presentation 1, Rajiv Gandhi International Airport, Hyderabad. Our guest speaker for the session is architect Gudmund Stokke, founding partner, Nordic, Office of Architecture, in conversation with architect Abhin Alimchandani, STUP Consultants, Pvt.Ltd. Our second case study is on the Kempegowda International Airport, Bangalore. Our guest speaker for the session is architect Lefkovits, Director, SOM, in conversation with architect Naresh Narasimhan, Managing Partner, Venkataraman Associates. Thank you. Allow me to introduce you to the speakers of our first case study for today. Architect Gudmund Stokke, founding partner, Nordic, Office of Architecture. Gudmund Stokke is the founding partner and head of design of Nordic, Office of Architecture. Gudmund Stokke has been in charge of master plans and terminal design for more than 15 airports. As a chief architect behind Oslo Airport, he was also responsible for both original Airport 1998, which is now listed as a national monument, and the T2 expansion 2017, which became the world's first BREEAM Excellent rated airport building and earned it the title World's Greenest Airport. He is currently engaged in the design of the new Noida Delhi International Airport in collaboration with STUP and the expansion of the Zurich Airport. Architect Abhin Alimchandani, Chairman, STUP Consultants Pvt.Ltd. Abhin is the architect on record and engineer on Bangalore Terminal 1 expansion with HOK and Terminal 2 with SOM, as well as the Navi Mumbai Airport with Zaha Hadid. STUP is also project manager for Vijayawada, Jabalpur and Sindhudurg airports. He has also mastered airport designs with Hyderabad, Agatti and Dirgapur airports. STUP is also a part of the Master Plan Consortium for Noida with L&B and has executed several international projects globally as a design center. STUP does master planning, terminal building design, including architecture, structure, MEP, and interior design in-house, as well as provides project management services for the project from concept to completion.
Good evening. Nordic and STUP Consultants welcomes the iDAC family. We are going to speak about our collaboration in Indian airport design projects. I'm Abhin Alimchandani, of STUP Consultants, and I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Gudmund Stokke, the founder of Nordic Office of Architecture. A little bit about STUP before I bring Gudmund to the fore. The STUP group of companies, STUP Consultants and STUP Design Forum, work on engineering and architecture of airport projects. We've been doing projects across the world in different sectors in airports, aviation, buildings, energy, environmental design, roads, bridges, metros, railways. All these different aspects go into an airport city and an airport project. We have about 1,200 professionals in STUP working for the last 50 odd years in countries across the world. We are largely an Indian company, but we export Indian knowledge and Indian technology globally and collaborate with global partners in various projects across the world. Airport projects require good architectural design skills. They require master planning ability. They require airport knowledge and airport know-how, not just of terminal buildings, but also of the various aviation facilities. They also require some knowledge of metros and urban infrastructure design, and sometimes even ports and jetties. And STUP has been working in all these disciplines in an integrated fashion, not just the architecture, but all the various engineering of these projects. So I'll take you through a few airport projects, but before that, I would like to say that today I'm going to be introducing you to Mr. Gudmund Stokke, who actually in 2003, when we first worked on the Hyderabad airport project, inspired STUP to actually grow in the field of airport design. And today we are working across India in airports. These are some of the airports that we've executed and are executing. And we've also worked across the world, collaborated with international architects, and done some international airport projects on our own. When we do an airport, at all different aspects of airport design, develop expertise in techno-economic feasibility studies of airports, which we've done for the airport at Goa, the new airport that's coming up at Mopa. We've done the master planning, which we've done with Nordic at Hyderabad. Then the runway and airfield design, we've done the entire master plan for an airport in Sindhudurg, where we've had to design the entire air side as well as the land side. And of course, the utility master plans, where you design all the utilities to make it a net zero airport, which we've done in Bangalore and also are doing with the Hadid's team in Navi Mumbai, where we've done the entire land side infrastructure for the airport, besides being the architects, collaborating architects for the terminal design. We also work on the QS and cost consultancy, as we've done. It's an expertise that we've developed, which is very, very useful when collaborating and working on airports with consultants globally. The passenger terminal building is very, very important. This is the one that we're doing in Vijayawada. Okay, but so are other buildings in an airport, like the ATC tower that we've done in Hyderabad. And then there have been buildings such as Mumbai, or the maintenance facilities buildings. All these buildings constitute an airport plan. So you have to understand even a firefighting building, ground handling facilities, and you have to have the know-how how to build these and how to design these while looking at an airport design. Working on an airport over a period of time, we've developed, we wear many hats. We wear the hat of the master planner, the architect, the structural engineer, the airside engineer. We do landside civil works. We do the MEP works, the interior design works. We also work on cost consultancy and the PMC. At STUP, we do all this work in-house. But when we collaborate with a master architect like Gudmund Stokke, for example, who I'm going to be talking with today, we actually explore all these dimensions while working with him in our various airport projects. We worked as the lead architect and project manager. We're doing an airport right now at Vijayawada, and we've worked on the detailed project report consultant on some airports. We've also worked for the EPC contractor. So there are many roles an architect can play, working directly with the airport authority, working sometime with the PPP player, and working often also with the EPC contractor who executes the airports. Well, we worked in Hyderabad as a consortium, and we will be discussing a little more about that later. But we also worked, for example, in airports in Africa, okay, where they were outsourced to us by Aéroport de Paris. And then we worked on projects as collaborating architects in India, like in Bangalore Terminal 1 and also Bangalore Terminal 2 with HOK and Skidmore Owings and Merrill. So we can work as architects in different capacities in different airports based upon the situation. And some of our airports, which we'd like to take you through. This is the new terminal at Jabalpur, which we are designing. This is the terminal at Vijayawada, which we've been executing. These projects are all under construction, inspired by the river Krishna. So you can see the kind of riverine form on the roof of the building out here. Sorry, let me just go back. Out here, inspired by the river. Most Indian airports require a lot of thematic design because they are gateways to cities, and they are required to inspire the people who come to them. But at the same time, they have to be very functional, and they have to be airports that kind of grow and flexible with the business plan, with the air traffic as it moves along. This is an airport that we are very proud of. It's an airport at Angati. It's perhaps India's first air-to-sea terminal, and it's designed, inspired by the Stingray, and it's a completely columnless form. And what you see out here is located on an island, and the runway extends into the sea. So there are many firsts in this particular design that we've been working on. So that was the introduction to STUP, and now I'd like to introduce Mr. Gudmund Stokke, my special guest for the evening. And Gudmund is a well-known architect. He is the founding partner and the head of the design of Nordic Office of Architecture. The firm was established in 1979. It is one of Norway's largest architectural practices with about 230 staff working in Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and the UK. The firm got its current name in 2012. He is the former president of the Norwegian Association of Architects, and Gudmund is credited with a wide variety of projects, including hospitals, industry, urban developments, master plans, government buildings, and airports. And he has a fantastic and open-ended way of designing, which allows for good collaborations and making great friends. Over to you, Gudmund.
Thank you, Abhin, for that kind introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to be joining you in the iDAC Summit Conference. It's a great occasion to present Nordic Office of Architecture, to tell you a little bit about the Hyderabad airport and also show you some other airport projects that we have. Nordic is powered by commitment. It's the same picture. Powered by commitment. And that is a commitment to our clients, to our employees, and to society. And of course, a total commitment to architecture. So we say that our company is powered by commitment. We are specialists in airports, and we enjoy working on airport projects, but we have quite a wide portfolio of projects. And this is the phase 2 of Oslo Airport, which was also won in an international architectural competition and has been awarded. And here we can see a design sketch from the first phase, somehow encompassing the main elements of an airport design and the design principles of creating simplicity and overview, and also local character. Because it's to us, it's been in airport design, it's very important to make it, of course, very functional. It must work as a machine or almost like a factory with processing the various flows. But at the same time, it should also be a place where people enjoy to be, a place that expresses some local identity and sense of place. And that's been very important to us in the Oslo Airport design. I mean, sum this up in the way we use materials, like natural materials, stone, concrete, and wood, as you can see in the wooden constructions. And also the craftsmanship that is used in order to make it, so that the shapes, like those beams you can see, they are shaped and honed to get this sort of craftsmanship quality. And even I say, there should be a tactile dimensions to airport design. When you touch elements, they should be good to touch. At the same time, we have roof lights, letting the natural light penetrating the roof and giving a light atmosphere, and of course also providing a very environmentally sound building. Here from the new T2 project, which is a separate new terminal that we designed a few years back, opened 2 years ago. Again, you can see here the use of material, wooden floors, the concrete, and the wooden beams. This is something that is repeated in all the elements of the airport, so it sort of binds the whole design together. Like here at the domestic departure, again, the wooden floor, the concrete to the columns, a steel link to the beams of wood, and then letting daylight filter down into the building. All this enhances the architecture and the experience for the people using the building. At the same time, it provides a tremendous functional clarity. At Oslo Airport, we are also designing an urban development called Oslo Airport City, which is in its sort of embryonic state at the moment. We have designed a master plan for it, and we are now in the process of designing the first hotel and office building to start off the airport city. Airport cities, of course, is very popular at every airport, and the development of airport cities seems to be quite slow wherever you look at airport cities around the world.
Had actually invited the best airport designers in the world, and they had a choice of selecting an architect and a designer who had done many airports, or selecting someone who had done a real quality airport. And I do remember that they asked us, how many airports have we done? And we, of course, STUP in India had done a few domestic terminals. We were looking to the leadership of Nordic and in designing airports. And Nordic had done the Gardermoen airport. And I think that one airport, it was not those 50 airports that some of our competitors had designed. It was the quality of that one airport, which actually was the gateway to our getting the Hyderabad commission. So I just thought that I should, use that to you. It was quite an adventure getting this airport itself, wasn't it?
It's you're quite right. The GMR family, as you could call them, came over to Oslo to look at the airport, and they were taken with it. They liked it. They liked the atmosphere, and they saw the qualities of simplicity and functionality combined with this tremendous sense of space. So that was the beginning of for me personally, almost like a fairy tale. Coming to India to design a brand new airport, and the friendship that we've developed both with our clients and of course between the two of us it's been I think now 17 years of cooperation, which is fantastic.
Yes.
And it's become a very important part of your life, really.
So yes, absolutely. And well, that's Gudmund, I'd like you to take us through it. I'm going to ask you a few questions as we move along, and you could share our experiences in the airport design. So we'll go through this with a series of questions, and and we'll go about in a conversational mode. We would discuss the master plan, and then we would be discussing the terminal building, etc. So here are some images of the Hyderabad airport for those who have not traveled in it. It was considered amongst the leading airports of the world, and even till this date, it is considered for its size of terminal amongst the best airports of this type in the world. And what we all would like to know, all the audience at iDAC, is that this airport was probably the fastest designed and perhaps one of the fastest constructed airports this size in the world. And it was an adventure, not just in designing this airport, but it was how you plan to design this airport. So Gudmund, I would like you to take us through this journey. Okay, how did we organize the design team? How did we, I mean, once we, this is a whole team, people getting together, spending time in Hyderabad, conceiving a project along with a client in a record time. So it was quite fascinating how we all, COVI, Nordic, STUP, have organized ourselves. So I would like to share a few experiences about that.
We were together with Covi, who had also been our engineers on the Oslo airport, and they took the initiative with us to go to India and meet the GMR people, because they knew about the new design of the airport to come. And we did have a lot of contact with the GMR family, Gandhi family, and their staff over a 2 years period, in fact, before we actually were commissioned to design the airport. And along the way, obviously, we were looking for a local Indian partner to do engineering and architecture together with us. And I think there was a very, very fortunate should I call it, occurrence that your father, the esteemed Mr. Alimchandani, he was a personal friend of the CEO of Covi. And I think that friendship was renewed in this process. And we found very quickly when we started talking together, that we had the same good chemistry, and our thinking was such that we thought, yes, we can cooperate. And then we went jointly in the bidding situation, 2 or 3 rounds before we were able to get that project. And I remember our clients, we were the preferred client, the preferred bidders, but they had a little problem explaining to the airport authorities why they didn't choose the cheapest bidder, because we weren't cheapest, but they thought, our ideas on airport design were such that they wanted to hire us all the same. And we set up a team, as you can see on the screen, which is a very sort of blended team, working very closely together. Like I was like you can see on the left-hand side, head of design, with you, Abhin, as my partner, and we tried to sort of blend the Indian and the European in a most efficient way, which we succeeded very quickly to do. It was, of course, a very, very short period of time we had for the design of the master planning and the design of the terminal. That was possible for 2 reasons. I think, not to be too modest, I think our contribution, as a team, was very, very important, but also our clients' ability to make decisions was equally important. So we got this very good contact with GMR, and the mutual trust and respect contributed greatly to the fast track development we were able to do together with our client.
Right, Gudmund. That's certainly true. And we made these organization charts, etc., about how we would distribute the work. But what was important was that all of us were there together, and we were all in it together, and we were kind of delivering the project from a blank slate to the completed product, and an integrated responsibility between the 3 of us. It was a fascinating experience because it was a very nice, open-ended, participative process of all of us kind of working together, going through tough times and good times, but seeing that the airport reached its destination. But everyone discusses various airports. You see, the commission that we got in Hyderabad were different from a lot of other international commissions. Is that in Hyderabad, they gave one particular designer the entire role of defining the entire airport. Unlike the airports that we worked in Bangalore and Mumbai and Navi Mumbai, etc., in this airport, you just were given a blank slate, and we had to develop the entire concept, including the air side, the land side, the terminal building. And not only that, even the business plan and the various surveys were under our roof. And the onus was on us that when you say master planner, right, the master plan was the master plan in all senses of the word. It was not just a master plan, but it was actually planning how to take GMR from a blank slate to actually tendering the project out. So I would like you to explain to us, the different aspects that we had to take care of while doing the master plan.
Yes, of course, there were all the various stakeholders, a great number of them. We had to meet and get their demands and their needs and try to incorporate into the plan. Security, customs, all environmental authorities and so forth. So it was quite a complex situation to relate to. Luckily, we had had you who knew the way around the local sort of maze of authorities. But it was like juggling a number of balls at the same time and getting it down into a holistic approach, which was the big challenge.
Yes, I think that was, and the big issue for us was how we could organize ourselves to deliver this project. So while we will talk with the audience about the design, what's very important is how we designed ourselves, our kind of consortium to design this project. So I'd like you to throw some light on how we deliver this, because this truly is a record-breaking delivery timeline for an airport project, particularly with the degree of responsibility that we had. Bangalore Airport was actually being designed for 2.5 years before we started Hyderabad, and we had to deliver Hyderabad before Bangalore was commissioned. That was our target. So it's a PPP airport, and we are working for a client, and we got to win the race. So Gudmund, could you elaborate a little bit upon how we organize ourselves to deliver this?
Because of many work streams that had to go in parallel, and the way we organized it was to set up the teams that could work on the different aspects, like terminal design, the actual master planning, the road systems and airside systems, all the auxiliary buildings, but also there was no topographical study and geotechnical, which also had to be done at the same time, feeding in information for the design work. And there was work going on for the forecasting of the passenger flows, which impacted on the design. The whole air traffic studies, how is it actually going to work in the air? And of course, our input to the master plan also had a separate group working on it. So the art for us was in a way to be able to combine all these work streams towards one common goal. And again, I enhanced the contributions from the client to that. We were able to do this together and be very very target conscious, because we knew the short time frame.
Yes, I think it was the client's contribution can never be underestimated. It was absolutely fantastic. And also what was interesting was that we literally had to get a business plan going, the air traffic survey going, and we had to also get the land surveys going while the master plan was being done. And the master plan had to be flexible enough that it had to be able to incorporate the information as it came along. So it's not as if we waited for the information to start working on the master plan. The master plan was being designed simultaneously with the inputs, and everybody was working on hunches. So it was like a relay race where everyone had to kind of, contribute live to the evolution of the design, and including the client. The client understood this and was engaged in this and was taking decisions together with us in this. So it was truly everyone rolling up their sleeves and delivering the project. Gudmund, I think this slide explains itself in terms of the different aspects that we had to complete in just 6 months. But what is interesting is that we went from a blank slate, from November 2023 and delivered the entire package, including all these surveys and business plans, and including all the decisions by the client in just 6 months, which really, while starting out, we were wondering whether we'd be able to do. But along with Christmas vacations, which were cut short, okay, we managed to do everything, did we not?
That's right. Yes, indeed, and it's very sort of, we had to be very focused, Abhin, to be able to sort of make the right decisions on our side too, and also, of course, when you have such a short time span, you have to be very, very focused, and you also use your intuition quite a lot, because of what are you recommending to your client also have to be, you can't do huge studies over weeks and months. You have to be very, very sort of simple in the way you do things, knowledge based. And I think I'll show you a couple of sketches after, because they were quite instrumental in this process.
So before you go to the sketches, I'd like to speak to you a little bit about, how you do a PPP airport. These were the first PPP airports in India, and it required a totally different approach towards designing. So you could elaborate on this slide. In fact, this slide was prepared at the time. This is from the presentation we made to JMR at that time. Could you explain a little bit about this value-driven approach?
Obviously, it's we design the airport, and we also make the specifications on a high level on the capabilities of the airport. And it's always, there is this need to have, which without it won't work as an airport. But then there are additional qualities that can be instilled into the design, which may have a cost impact, but also represents added value for the client. So a lot of the, call it the architectural expression in terms of the roof, the spaces, the way we let light into the building, providing views out with large, very tall glass walls. All those things are additional to what you need to have. And again, that was something that we, together with the client, and I stress this all the time, agreed, this is what we need to reach the overall goals, because the goals were to provide something new, something that hasn't been done in India before, and would be of a world-class standard. And that's quite ambitious. It's ambitious for the client, from the client, and of course also for us. It was a big and very, very nice challenge to get. So we formulated this vision for the Hyderabad airport, that it's the clean and the green airport. That was the sort of the headline of it. And was it
Gudmund, this was the first. Sorry, this was the first green airport. This was the first green airport in India, and perhaps the first LEED approved airport, amongst the first in the world,
yes,
to my knowledge.
It was
because one of the first greenfield airports at Gandhi.
That's right. So it was classified LEED silver, which was quite unique at that time.
So Gudmund, you were speaking, you were going to tell us a little bit about the master planning, and you said you would show us some of your sketches. So I think it'll be very interesting to understand what are the principles that you follow when you develop your master plan.
We have a sort of set of design principles that they're quite simple but quite important too. But obviously high standards in safety and security, and this efficiency of operation, and that has a lot to do with the design. How do you actually design the master plan for reducing the distances for taxiing and transportation on the ground, and the commercial principles too. Air traffic generates income, but the main income is from some other sources, non-aviation incomes, and also to allow for that both in the terminal areas but also on the land side is very important. And then this GMR's mantra too, to exceed customer expectation, is something that you strive to when you design an airport, or at least in this case. And also getting a good working relationship with the stakeholders, because they, their demands and needs are very important to the design, and valuing human resources. Also, this fostering a culture of innovation is important, because in every airport you design and you build, you've learned a lot from previously, and you want to move steps ahead every time, which will be beneficial for the airport itself, but for the passengers, and indeed for society as a whole. And then there is this absolute essential thing about flexibility, to be able to make changes during the lifetime of the airport, have the expansion without impacting on a number of other elements in the airport, not creating domino effects if you want to expand one area into the next. So there's flexibility, and the last point about cost efficiency is always there and always of paramount importance. So we have to think smart, how to get the most out of the money that our client is investing at great risk, I must add too. I think it's good to just come back to these sketches, because it's always, and I know all I'm speaking to in this iDAC conference know that, but it starts with a thought and maybe a couple of pencil strokes, because what all we do, it starts in our mind. And I just pictured, I took out this picture from the National Review of Architecture in Norway, the front page, and the sketch you see to the left is actually the site analysis of this 13 square kilometer site. The day before, or the same day I sketched this out, Abhin and I and the client had been walking around the airport side for 8 hours, and getting really the feel, the feel of the site. And you were walking there, you could actually sense those, like I've shown here in the sketch, little valleys and the almost like a little hill, which was very, very important for the way it solved it. So I think this is done in September, 25th of September 2003, the day after we agreed on the contract. And I sat down and did 4 or 5 sketches on, what sort of master plan concept could you have? And alternative B, as you can see to the right, is actually what we ended up with. So if you go to the next slide, it's, again, it's a very complex, very difficult thing. But in my mind, I think that however big or complex something is, the main thing is to find the simplicity in it, because if you find the simplicity and make it simple, it's going to be easy to execute, it's going to be easy to operate. And I think also at the end of the day, you have a better condition for making beautiful architecture. So here this sketch shows, after a very brief discussion with the client in October 2003, just after a month after we got the job, we discussed various airport layout alternatives, and we ended up with a 2 terminals concept, because the way we saw it is that it's going to be a kind of a first phase with 1 terminal, 1 runway, and with the forecasts, that's going to last us a long time before we need to open up a new runway and another terminal. So that's what we ended up with, and also then 2 big taxiways connecting those two terminals. And in the middle, a lot of land to develop for an airport city, which it will be, and increasingly as the years pass on, will be an increasingly important source of income for the airport owner. We go to the next one. And this is Abhin, you will tell us a little bit more about what the actual buildings are, but what the main area here too, the main sort of focus is to create this flexibility so that within the various areas of the airport, it's possible to expand the single functions and change it without impacting the totality of the airport. Abhin, will you say a few words
In
about
fact, Gudmund, yes. Yes, I would. And in fact, Gudmund, it's fantastic to see the sketch and the final, product. And it's fascinating to see that, because you can see that the truth in the sketch, the flexibility that there was in the sketch at that time, has a kind of a reality to it, which has translated into a successful design. You see, what I found very interesting is that made options. It's not that we stuck to one sketch. I think there were almost 23 options that were discussed and discarded, because it was a huge decision, not just a plan. It's a business plan, so it's got so many aspects to it. We had to very efficiently design the airside to your airside areas, and we had to maximize the landside developments to generate revenues for the client. So what was behind this plan, besides the architecture and the aesthetics and the functionality, was also that this is a PPP airport and our client needs to have return on investment. And also the connectivity with the transport system. So you've got road connectivity, a possibility of a metro connectivity. You have to look far ahead in time. Although the metro would take time to come, we have to consider that. We had to think of a complete cargo complex and logistics terminal, which we've designed out here, which has great value in the future, for GMR. There's, of course, the air traffic control tower, which is critical, had to be positioned properly so that it could have, access to the view of this runway, and perhaps also to some extent the runway in the future. And of course, the terminal building and the various maintenance facilities, etc., which also are a business proposition for the airport owner. And we had to design a complete maintenance park and city. And then the highest value area, which kind of fell between the ring road here, between the terminals, where we had actually going to be doing the airport hotel and, of course, the car park, which is also a very important revenue generating area for the airport. So designing an airport required all these components to come together into one master plan. So, Gudmund, perhaps you can explain a little bit about how you, envision the phasing of master plan, because what was beautiful about this master plan was that the master plan had to phase itself for different types of growth in the future. So I think I've put some slides here.
This is very, very interesting, because the client, the forecast showed us that 5 million passengers in a few years would be probably what would happen, and then the sort of very, 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 very long term, it would be increasing to say 20. The challenge then is to you must design an airport terminal that is have a capacity of 5 million, but at the same time, all the critical elements must be such that it can grow into a big terminal. Like here it's shown from 5 to 40. And that has to do with, how you size the terminal in terms of, the distance from the entrance facade to the airside facade for flexibility, and also the levels, so that it, you have to solve a long-term demand while still designing quite a small terminal. So that's what we managed to do. I think in Bangalore at the same time, they were designing a terminal for the 5 million passengers, and they designed it as a 1.5 million passenger terminal, but 1.5 floor terminal. And I think they found that they were unable to expand and had to start building new terminals. Here, this is a picture of the expansion being done at the moment. And what has proved is that the expansion principle that we have, or strategy that we embedded in our master planning, is actually being done. And what we've also seen,
yes,
and
I mean, I've just made the expansion.
What we've also seen is that the airport terminals, they tend to grow bigger now than was the perception 20 years ago. So, and we see that our design is robust to take more than the 20 million passengers in one terminal, but it can expand. Probably I think this facility can grow to something in the order of 40 million passengers before you have to start building a second terminal. So we can see that our strategy is been fulfilled and even had greater potential than we sort of thought at the time we designed it. So I think it's very satisfying to see that it works so well for the owners of Hyderabad Airport.
So Gudmund, one of the most important buildings in the airport site is the terminal building. And of course, the terminal building is always special. There are other good buildings as well, but it's always special. So let's discuss a little bit about the design principles of the terminal building at Hyderabad, because it was quite special. I've put a picture of the terminal building out here so you can explain the components.
Yes, it's we can come back to the principles. So here you see it, it's a view from the ATC tower. And you can see the central building with the two roofs connecting and then roofing the central processor. And then the piers coming out on the side. And you can see the green the green grass in front of the pier sticking out. That's where it will expand in the future. And indeed they have started doing. And also to the left of the main, the two roofs, you can see the tent-like structure, which is a very important and I think very interesting feature of Hyderabad Airport, because it's always, it's a matter of creating a sense of place, and we do that within the terminal building in many respects. But the main element is this sort of outdoor but still indoor covered space, which we call the airport village, which is where you, as a visitor to Hyderabad, this is where you come out and you get this fantastic atmosphere of India. And it's also a very important place for meeters and greeters and for staff to have their lunch and so forth. So it's become a very strong element in the terminal, which is kind of extra. And this is the first time I've seen it in any airport. And it's interesting to see that this is something that is coming in other airports in India too. So I feel that was quite successful.
Yes, as it was a great innovation. And Gudmund also, I think it's very apparent from this image that each component of this terminal could grow on its own based upon the business plan and the necessity in the future. It had a very, very flexible architecture, and also the aesthetics kind of dovetailed into that in a beautiful manner to allow that kind of expansion to happen, so that the terminal building looks complete at every stage. So yeah. it was very fantastic. So these design principles, for a terminal, which were developed, I'm just putting what was actually presented to the client at the time in 2003, which are very, very relevant today. So perhaps you can take us through some of these design principles.
Principles, they are almost, they're very simple. And you almost think, they could be irrelevant, but for us, it's actually very fundamental, this simplicity, which is, I think, in many ways, the most difficult thing to achieve in an airport, with the complexity and the very many conflicting demands. To create and maintain simplicity in the design, in the layout, in the architecture is so paramount importance for the the passengers' experience, for the operators, for the building costs, and for the expandability. And that ties us up with the flexibility that it's also very important how you structure the fixed elements in such a way that changes can be made over time, both in terms of expansion, but also changes, altered demands. Next one is make it loose fit. It's connected with the same, because it's, if you design it too tight and too specific, that you lose flexibility. So it's make the jacket a little bit big. That does allow for growth, expansion, and changes. And then, of course, make it convenient, comfortable, attractive. This is for the traveling public, but equally important for the people working in this very big workplace. And then maximize revenue generating areas. That's fundamental to the success of an airport terminal, that they are able to generate lots of commercial income to make this a viable business. There's one more, if I may, Abhin, and that's also this, make it give it a sense of place, make it a belonging to where it is, adding this, in this case, Indian feel, at the same time being a super modern, contemporary, future-looking, future-proof even building. But there must be a sense of place because of arriving. Now I'm arriving in Hyderabad to this fantastic country.
Absolutely, that was a governing criteria. And I think while the spirit of this airport was Scandinavian in its achieving simplicity, right, it also had a kind of a Indian touch. Its roots were perhaps Indian, because when you come to the airport, you truly get a feel of Hyderabad. You mentioned the airport village, and we'll talk about that later. The idea was how to bring in that hustle bustle, that character, that buzz, as soon as you arrive. And those psychological points are so important for giving the customer, the traveler, a comfort in the airport. Of course, there was the last point, which is to rationalize all the technical installations and technical facilities in the airport, which was also done in the terminal, which was also done in good time. I have here a sketch, an early sketch, of the entire terminal building and the arrival forecourt. Perhaps you'd like to discuss a little bit about the various facets of this building.
Yeah, no, again, it's, as I said before, it starts with a simple sketch. And this shows us how the terminal building in the middle, what we did is for the central processor, you notice that the width of the airside part of the main roof is wider than the landside part. This has to do with providing expandability of the whole central building, at the same time creating a holistic design for the roofscape of the central processor. That's also brought the roof down rather than letting it keep flowing very high up, in order to shade against the sunshine. And then, as you can see, there is a room for expansion on each side of the central processor on the land side, and similarly on each pier there is growth, either domestic on the left hand side and international on the other side. This has now been being constructed as we speak, and we'll see that they now have expanded the piers a bit to get more commercial space, and I think that's responding to an increasing demand in any airport terminal in quite a nice way. And then there is the airport village that you can see also in this section with the two roofs, and then to the right, it's a tent roof really over the airport city, and then a raised access bridge for departing passengers, bringing them straight into the terminal, and also a curb for arriving passengers on the ground level. And then the airport city in the middle, getting a good breeze through and protected from sun and rain. And as I said, it's become almost like a sort of hallmark of Hyderabad airport.
I think what's fascinating, Gudmund, is that as you're walking through, as you enter the airport, there's this whole series of spaces that you feel. You know, one is the airport village, which welcomes you with its buzz, and then you go into the main terminal, and there's this whole thing about bringing light in a comfortable way, not skylights which are going to heat the terminal up, but bringing lights in, you know, through clear stories and, you know, lifted roofs. So it allows the design to expand, but at the same time, it allows light to filter in to make the walk very pleasant. So I thought that is one of the very successful aspects of why the roof is designed. It's not just for the aesthetics, but it's very, very important functionally as a roof.
Good point. And also, if you look closely between the two roofs, so underneath the connection of the two roofs, you'll see there is an office building, which provides some very valuable floor area for the airport operator. And we also tried, you know, so that we create a space by those two roofs, which is a very clear space and continuous, and the office building standing as a freestanding element under that big roof. I think architecturally it's very important that it doesn't grow into each other and you lose the overview of the components. And by doing this also, I think the orientation and understanding of how the airport terminal works is much clearer to both the passengers and also to the people working in the terminal.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could literally see your journey through into the pier, and then from the pier to your aircraft. So the whole thing about visual clarity, you know, in the terminal was, I think, one of the key goals to achieve. Gudmund, one interesting thing about the Hyderabad terminal was that it was perhaps at that time one of the deepest terminals in India. So it was 160 meters, and therefore the need for bringing light in and making the journey pleasant, because we had to have a large area for retail, because this was a commercial airport, it was a PPP airport. And some of the other airports that were competing with us, for example, Bangalore, did not have this kind of important depth to the terminal, you know. So
this is something that we see actually, that it's the depth of the terminal is actually, as we go along, it's increasing in various airports, because you know the demands for security and commercial especially is actually increasing, so that the depth will become larger. So airports that we are designing at the moment have up to about 200 meters, and even in Istanbul, which is a quite exceptional, it's more than 300 meters depth, due to the same factors and the size of the terminal. And also I think it's the principle that we separate departing passengers and arriving passengers on separate levels is something that vouches for a good circulation and good sort of passenger flows without bottlenecks, which is also obviously very important in the airport and the way passengers perceive the comfort and the convenience. And that I think we have achieved quite well in Hyderabad.
I think
part of the design principle of the simplicity is also, and flexibility, is this modularity, that the terminal is actually composed of a number of components like check-in, baggage claim, and baggage handling. You know, these are 18-meter bays, or 36 meters as maybe, and the terminal, the processor, is actually an addition of equal, sort of similar units that are combined and for first phase, and also the same sort of modules you add as you expand the terminal. So that this vouches for expandability and also less complexity when you have to expand the terminal.
These are some of the early perspective views we made for the terminal. I thought we should show people from the sketch to the perspective view, and then of course to the final built terminal. We'll take them through a few slides of that. This is the airside view at that time, and we made a nice video because we had to also help GMR in some marketing material to market the airport, because part of the exercise was to achieve financial closure. So we gave views of the entire terminal, and of course we selected materials, etc., to bring warmth, and used local stone for the floor of the airport to give that local touch to the terminal. So it was very important to simulate these. Gudmund, there were several innovations in the Hyderabad International Airport. It was one of the first PPP airports, in this part of the world, and particularly in India. And we had to break through on a lot of things. For example, one of the things that we managed to break through on, which I can't really show in a slide, is that normally when you came to India at that time, you had to go and x-ray your bag before you went to the check-in, where we kind of broke through to see that we had inline check-in, inline security systems. And that meant actually working with the airport authority and the DGCA, and we must thank them for all the cooperation they gave us to see that some of these concepts, we had just 6 months, and we had to break through and make these things happen in an Indian situation. So I thought perhaps you should take us through some of the very specific innovations, in Hyderabad Airport. For example, the concept of swing gates.
Yeah, this again is something to do with flexibility in operation and cost-efficient solutions, so that it is actually possible to, because you do need to allow for the larger aircrafts, but at the same time they are more, they're not there so often, and they take a lot of space. So the idea then, which was fairly new at the time, was to be able to combine the large category E aircrafts down with two smaller aircrafts. And this is something that we did in Hyderabad, and from what I hear, it's been quite a sort of operational success to do it that way.
Yes, and I think one interesting thing was this aspect of having international flights at night and domestic flights at day, and to be able to use the entire pier, effectively. So to allow swing gates so that you could use the pier for international when you needed it and use more bays. And then this thing, I think that was the first, because the Indian situation demanded we had this kind of distinction between day and night travel, which is not always found in other airports in the world. So
Right.
it was one of the successful aspects. And so too, one of the big things in airports is that when you have this double level separation, departure above and domestic below, the arrival below, the arriving passengers normally don't get this impact of this entire flamboyance of the terminal building. But in Hyderabad, we managed to get that feature in. So perhaps you can enlighten us about that.
The idea, I think in all airports, the quality of space that you move through there has a great impact on how you perceive walking distances and how you perceive the building and the sense of arrival. And so we tried to introduce these openings down, so you get the double volumes, a lot of light and air. So there is a combination of spaces where you get all the light and air coming down, and some narrower corridor or lower ceiling heights further in. But the total experience then, I would think, maybe becomes attractive, and you get this spatial feeling that is always very popular, very good for the clients, so they're travelers.
A little bit about the office building and the way it's been handled, Gudmund.
Yes, because there is a great demand for office space in the terminal for all the functions that are closely integrated into the operation. And we feel that, rather than, as you see in many airports, there is spread out where you find some extra square meters you put an office in. We concentrate the offices in one office block that is standing under, as I mentioned, under the big roof, freestanding, very flexible, and can take, fulfill the demands of the various users of the terminal. And that also becomes a kind of a architectural element, that it does divide and define the space on the, where the check-in, you pass through the security and then arrive in the more commercial and recreational parts of the terminal. So it also adds to the clarity. And as I said before, it's also important that that office building remains a freestanding element in the big volume, rather than growing up and being integrated in the roof. As you see on the picture on the right-hand side, that's actually from Oslo Airport, where we have a similar approach, but it's the same principle we did in Hyderabad.
Yes. So it's, these are some of the sections of the airport village, which was an innovation in Hyderabad, which now is become something that we use in all Indian airports, because in India, we have this whole culture of people coming and meet us, greet us, and being there for 2 or 3 hours, to say goodbye to people. And, they are waiting there for arriving passengers as well. And so the Hyderabad airport had this concept of this hustle, bustle, and village. And we were wondering, in a very contemporary, very functional kind of airport aesthetic, how do we bring that absolutely local touch? And we said, let the people bring it, let the community bring it. And this airport village concept, and in the beginning, it met some skepticism. Even to have a tensile roof was questioned: how long will it last? Will it work? Etc. Etc. But today it's growing. And one of the things the first thing that grew in the terminal was the airport village, as a successful intervention. So this is early, besides the sun, rain, and we treated it climatologically at that time. I think this was a very important part of the character of the airport, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I can speak from my own experience, because I've been back to Hyderabad a number of times after the completion of the airport. And every time I come out, I get this wonderful feeling, now I'm in this great country of India. So that really works.
So these are some pictures of it. Although this picture shows the sophistication of the design, actually it is the buzz and the life within this space that makes this, a very, very successful intervention. And I thought, one of your old sketches could probably show us how this entire concept had come together. This is an old concept after a kind of a workshop that you had put together, a concept sketch.
No, this only shows what we've been talking about. The two roofs, the independent office building standing underneath the connection of the two roofs, and also the sort of volumes of the airport village with the little tent roofs. How it sort of moves and from the ground level up into the upper level. So the sort of spatial experience for the travelers, I think. It's something that we have been very conscious of, and that I feel that this is quite successful. Because again, it's to do with sort of spatial clarity. Yeah, I like this drawing here, because it's not a drawing, it's a photo, because it does show exactly what I had in that sketch, and at the same time, it's always, I think, so exciting to see buildings on the way up, before it's completed also, because it shows the sort of the bones and the skeleton of the whole organism in a very clear manner. And that's how it was when it was opening up back in 2008. And I think this smooth line of the roof is something I feel very comfortable with.
Yes, it's a wonderful and it's wonderful defining character of the Hyderabad terminal. I'd like to speak about some of the local touches that we brought into the terminal as well. Besides this, the idea of having a kind of a solar screen, a screen for the office building, we'd actually worked a lot on the kind of skylights we would have. It was all about how we would introduce light into the terminal. And one of the things we were looking at, we were going to meet the client, and we got a call saying that the chief minister would like to have local character in the terminal building. And of course, he would like to have that, and we would like to have that. And I think on the way, we said, okay, we are going to bring this character and we are going to bring it through light. But in India, light has to be very contextual. And so we kind of use the concept of the eye, the beauty of the eye. And Andhra Pradesh, my wife comes from there, is wonderful eye. It's an eye to the sky, a skylight. But at the same time, this was the temple tree leaf, because the leaf of the temple tree has this kind of linearity and smoothness to it, which is quite fluid and dynamic. And what we did is we tried to make this into a series of kind of north lights, because we didn't believe that we should have direct light coming in. So we were working with, how we can bring those in. So these are sketches from the time, which describe the skylight. And this sketch, of course, showed the airport village to the left, our initial perspective view of the airport village. But talking about the skylight, the wonderful aspect of the skylight is that at different scale that the roof moves, the skylight kind of defines the Hyderabad airport. And I was so happy that the signages outside the airport also kind of use this kind of general theme. So it kind of brought you into the airport, and then the daylight chandelier of the highlight airport of the Hyderabad International Airport kind of decorated it. I thought that was a very interesting aspect, and little things bring character, to the terminal. So both in the day and the night, it's been a successful intervention. And another aspect that I thought was, very interesting is the air traffic control tower. And the air traffic control tower is also a great opportunity. I just thought I'd show a sketch of the time, kind of a small sketch of the time that I made for the tower. And that's the final built tower. And of course, the airport identifies itself with the air traffic control tower. This was the tallest air traffic control tower in India when we made it. I think it was about 68 meters tall. And, there's a funny story behind it. It's got this kind of collar at the top. And Gudmund, interesting thing about that collar is India, of course, everybody loves to play cricket in India. And Hyderabad, the captain of the Indian team came from Hyderabad at the time, Mr. Azharuddin. And he used to always turn up his collar, you know, whenever he used to play. So that was how he used to be identified. And it was a bit of a amusing thing that when we designed it, we said, okay, let's give this a little collar, which reminds us of the son of Hyderabad. So this is just, aspect. But of course, designing the ATC tower, designing the various other buildings in it was a great experience. And I thought this was an airport that was conceived and delivered. Okay, we started by about 4.5 years. I think this airport was inaugurated, and it was an airport which was quite a successful airport for our client, which is the most important thing. And I must tell you that it was quite appreciated by the people of Hyderabad, and of course, I met clients, etc., across India who also were quite pleased with the airports. People who had journeyed were quite pleased with the airport. So it gave a very satisfying feeling, both in terms of the way we worked on it and the way the final product came out. And of course, you can improve things as you move along, and you can do better as you move along. So, but it's satisfying to see that this initiative back in 2003 is contemporary even today. Gudmund, I would like to ask you about what happened after Hyderabad. I'd like you to just speak a little bit about some of your other airport endeavors, so that people know that, you after Hyderabad, you've kind of developed many more airports. And then you've also, thought of collaborating further in India. So let's talk first about your important projects post Hyderabad Airport.
There's been a number. One that you saw initially is, of course, that the T2 development of Oslo Airport, which was a big architectural competition that we were lucky enough to win, and has been a very, very major project for us. But we also, for many years now, been working at the Stockholm Airport, Arlanda, with expansion projects there. It has been also very interesting, totally different concepts and much more, organically grown airport. But every element there, it has to be as simple and practical as possible, and then adding to a totality which is more complex. But it's been interesting. and I think we have, come with some contribution. But one of the another fairy tale, as it were, because I do describe Hyderabad as a fairy tale that I've been in, is the Istanbul new airport, which actually came to a large extent out of the work we did in Hyderabad, because some of the management at the Istanbul new airport had been working on the project in Hyderabad. So we were asked to submit not a proposal, but an expression of interest, and there were competitive interviews with 10 or 12 different designers architects around the world, and our team, the Grimshaw and Haptic of London and Nordic, we were lucky enough to get that job, which was, as you can see here, it's a big airport and one of the biggest in the world. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the terminal. And this is, again, I like to show you these drawings because it always starts with some very, very simple sketches, and which are transformed into hard lines and hard buildings. So this is the first sketch that I did on the plane down to Ankara to discuss. And if you proceed with the next one, it shows in many ways it's a similar concept to many other airports with the central building and connected piers. But here, of course, it's not one to each side, but it's in all 5 connected piers, and it has a capacity of about 100 million passengers per year. So that's one of the biggest airport terminals in the world, with 1.4 million square meters of floor area. We'll take the next one. Here you can see it during construction, and I think you sense some of the scale of it when you see the cars and things moving on the ground. And this was also built in a very, very short period of time, from inception to completed building. Opened 8th of April last year. Typical plan. So it's in many respects based on similar principles as we have in Hyderabad and Oslo, for that matter. But as I mentioned before, the depth of the building, this is a cross section through the pier, through the central building, is now 320 meters from the entry facade to the outside facade. Again, you can see those office buildings standing inside, and there are also a 400-bed hotel inside the building, and the light coming through the roof, and all these qualities that we want to introduce into the terminal. Next one. So this is a very early design sort of representation, and we were very, it's a very modern building. It's very large, but again, this also this feel that you are actually here entering the world city of Istanbul, and where we characterize the architecture in the traditional architecture in Istanbul with simplicity and richness, and it's the way they use natural light. You see those rings of natural light that are reflected on the floor, and also the use of pattern in the ceiling and also color. These are elements that make up this sense of place. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that this is looking looking more or less the same direction as we saw on that 3D, with the hotel and the office building on each side of the security control that's straight ahead. If you go on, they're more of the same. But it's been, the basic things, the simplicity, the flexibility, and the architectural expression all combined into creating a place where where people want to come, and we know that this is a major transit hub, and what we get back or information is that it's become, people choose Istanbul when they're going out to different places because the airport is so convenient and attractive. So that's been a fantastic design journey to be on.
I think the whole concept comes across so clearly, Gudmund, the Byzantine character interpreted in such a contemporary way. And you're right. I sometimes fly Turkish Airlines just so that I can be at Istanbul airport for a while, because it's a great place to stop over and enjoy the airport premises. So the trick is that even though it's such a large airport, you don't feel these large distances. It's quite intimate in its own way. So Gudmund, could you discuss a little bit about your future outlook, for airports and collaborations in India and elsewhere in the world?
So we have been very fortunate to have GMR as our client in a number of airports in India, and hopefully that will happen also in the future. But we also see, Abhin, that there is a great potential for us combining our competencies and knowledges in designing airports in India. So at the moment we are together in one very major project in Delhi, and we are looking at cooperating on a different airport too at the moment. So we have two in the pipeline at the moment, Abhin.
Yes, I know.
And we also had, that's not in the future, but in the past we cooperated on the competition for the urban design planning of the capital of Qatar, the Doha.
Yes,
it was also a fantastic experience.
That was a lovely experience as well. I think this idea of working together and collaborating and doing work is it's a dream of mine, and I think it's like you talked about fairy tales. So it's great to continue the fairy tale, chapter 2 of Hyderabad. I hope we get the opportunity, and I know that the important thing about collaboration is to have a very open system of design where people can all contribute to the project, and to have a structure which is kind of allows for ideas to come to the table, and also to select the correct idea, and to have a sense of commitment from everyone. So as a person who's been leading teams, like for example, Istanbul, and then we are working with you on this competition, recently for an airport, how do you organize yourself for working in a collaborative manner? How do you organize the entire design process in a collaborative manner?
My whole attitude in this is when I appreciate collaboration with other architects and of course with engineers. But one of the reasons why I like collaboration with other architects is that in every instance I find that I learn a lot, and I'm sure they learn from us too. But that aspect of learning and also getting to know people and form friendships are formed, that's very important. But I think the basic in the way I see it is that you have to make teams that are blended, that we people work together, not like it's a sort of total separation. You do this, we do that, but we do it together. And I think the way I experience our collaborative projects, in many different, is that the success lies in the way we are able to work together, combining our knowledge. And then you have to, of course, organize it in such a way that you have an organogram and a way to work that is efficient to solve that task. But to me, the basics of it is the starts in your mind. We do this together, and that's sort of my sort of bearing principle for this type of cooperation.
Yeah, and in fact, it allows ideas to come to the table. So it gives you more. So I was wondering when in Hyderabad there were three of us working on the project, three firms, and there was the feeling of a challenge and then satisfaction of kind of ownership of a good airport being delivered. But then I was wondering, when you're working in Istanbul, how you had got other star architects joining you and working together. And then when you wanted to do a competition in India, here we had a whole team of designers coming across, each one with their huge reputations and their huge achievements. But it was like an orchestra, I would say, where everyone was playing his part and the whole thing was making music. So I think, as the conductor of that orchestra, I kind of commend you for the way in which you kind of organize the design process. I think it's fascinating to work in a way in which everyone's contribution eventually leads to a team product.
Yeah, not true. And again, I think it's all to do with sort of as with the client, mutual respect and trust is fundamental for the project to be good. And I think it's always important to think, what is the purpose? And the purpose is to make an outstanding project together. It's not like that I'm the boss, I decide, or things like that. Together. And in all my experience, with big projects, that's how I feel it. We get the best results.
Thank you, Gudmund, for a very, very pleasant evening and a great chat. It's been great reminiscing about Hyderabad Airport, but I think it's all very relevant as well, because we are working today, on airport projects together. I think it's been great to have the audience at iDAC. I hope they enjoyed this session, and look forward to their comments. And I thank you all for participating in our presentation. And thank you, Gudmund.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure, and I hope I soon be able to see you all in India.
Sure, look forward.
I hope this case study was extremely insightful for our audience. Let's move on to our next case study for today's session. The speakers for today's second case study are architect Peter Lefkovits, director, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. Architect Lefkovits is a designer with significant experience leading projects around the world. He has worked in India, the Middle East, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the United States. Lefkovits' portfolio includes mixed-use development, residential, and hospitality projects, commercial office buildings, and airport terminals. Lefkovits has played a significant role in the development of SOM's strong niche practice in India. Lefkovits has developed expertise in the aviation sector and has led the design and implementation of the two SOM's award-winning airport terminal designs, Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport Terminal 2 in Bombay and Kempegowda International Airport Terminal 2 in Bengaluru. The conceptual framework for these complex facilities grew out of Lefkovits' interest in the synthesis of architecture, structure, and the environmental design. This design approach is the foundation of his aviation facility work and has also influenced his design of many other building types. Talking about architect Naresh Narasimhan, managing partner, Venkataraman Associates. Venkataraman Associates, a multidisciplinary, award-winning architecture firm based in Bangalore. Steeped in values of design quality, integrity, commitments, and ethics, VA has a steady reputation for the design of benchmark projects across typologies since 1969. Naresh trained as an architect at the Manipal Institute of Technology, India, Bachelor in Arts 1985, and studied further management at Harvard in 1995. He founded the MOD Institute, an action-oriented think tank addressing highly relevant urban design issues, and is a trustee of the Suchitra Cinema and Cultural Academy. His interests ranges from politics, governance, and communication strategies to cinema, art, and popular culture.
All right. Welcome, Peter. I think this is going to be an interesting session. You know, I'm from Bangalore, and for one, I am biased, right? I think the Bangalore airport is the best airport in India, if not one of the better ones on the whole planet. And I'm glad to see that SOM has been appointed to and is in the process of building Terminal 2, which is, I'm sure, going to probably be better than Terminal 1. So please, would you like to tell us more about it?
I'd love to, Naresh, and great to see you again. And thank you to you and Karishma and iDAC for having us here. And we're honored to take part in this great event to speak about airports and specifically speak about the new design of Terminal 2 in Bangalore, which we're very proud to have been part of. And we started this process of engagement maybe back in 2013, 2014. Actually was a competition we were successful in winning, and have been engaged in some manner since. But in the last 5 years, we were responsible for the design of the new Terminal 2, which will come adjacent to the existing Terminal 1, and we'll bring a brand new facility, a much needed facility in terms of capacity to the new airport, but also will be a great new beacon for Bangalore and for the people of Bangalore, we hope, if successful with the design.
It's always an architect's dream job. We all think that we're going to cap our careers with an airport terminal. But clearly it's a case of you haven't done it before, you're not very likely to do it in the future either. So, but would you tell us by saying that, can you tell us, maybe we'll show us some slides on how SOM became an expert in terminal planning, and maybe a little background on the history of terminals itself, and maybe tell us a little bit about how you approached the design concept of the Bangalore airport in particular. Would you like to share your screen at this point and talk about it?
I'd love to. Yeah, let me start with a slide here. So a little statement about SOM. This is a description of kind of who we are, and we're a collective of architects, designers, engineers, planners, building a better future. And that is our approach as a firm to any project, frankly, but to aviation as well, that we are many disciplines under one roof. So we bring architectural planning, structural engineering, aviation planning, sustainability, engineering, and it is the synthesis of all these things together that we think brings a building that is great and responsive and responsible, and a bit of a mantra about how we approach our projects. And it's appropriate.
May I interrupt for a minute? How old is Skidmore, Rowings and Merrill? Or I think it's called SOM now, right? But how old is the company itself?
The firm was incepted, yes. So the founding partners, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. It's interesting, in their founding, the roots of this idea of a multidisciplinary firm was at its origins. So we had an architect, a planner, and an engineer in Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. And it was that combination of these disciplines that was at the root of the founding of the firm. And they began in the late 30s. And one of the first commissions that SOM won was a commission to design a building at the World's Fair. And then it kind of grew from there, and established offices in Chicago, later in New York. And as many people know, drove forward an idea in America about modernist architecture. And I think historically we're very much known for high-rise architecture, commercial architecture, office buildings in many of the great cities. In Chicago, we're responsible for the Hancock Tower and the Sears Tower historically. In New York City, we were responsible for Tower 1 at the World Trade Center. And many people know us, for example, for the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the world's tallest building. in addition to that, we have done aviation work around the world, in many cities around the world. Here at home for us at JFK Airport in New York, the new Pearson Airport in Toronto, we were responsible for. And one of the slides I'll talk about is the historic Hajj terminal in Jeddah, which SOM won a 25-year AIA award for, which we're very proud of. And then more recently at home in India, we were the designers of the new T2 in Mumbai, which we were very proud of, and feel very fortunate to have done that work and now continue the work here in Bangalore with the new Terminal 2 there. So we're a worldwide firm, multidisciplinary, and go back to the early 30s, late 30s as the founding of the firm.
Excellent. So tell us more
I put together a few slides, and I thought it'd be interesting. We always have this chat about, you know, it's interesting to go back and see the origins of things and the evolution of the airport terminal. And one of the things I'd be remiss without talking about the development and engineering of aircraft, because it is the development of aircraft that is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, driver of the evolution of airport terminals, merely because of the fact that you are parking these aircraft at the building, and it is the accommodation of these vehicles that drive the planning and ultimately the size of the building, as you'll see. So in this kind of engineering chart you can see here, which talks about load factor, about the takeoff weight of aircraft. On the bottom left, you can see some of the DC-3 aircrafts, right? These were, 50-person aircrafts, propeller airplane, propeller jet airplanes. And you can see the kind of evolution going through it diagonally all the way to the top to the Airbus A380. So in terms of bracketing that, we're talking about 50 people on an airplane versus 500 people on an airplane, or upwards of 500 people, and everything kind of in between. So you'll see the airports that I talk about really are in response to the growth of aviation, the growth of the jetliner, and the size of it and its capacity, and how terminal buildings have had to respond, historically over the years. And many people point back to the original terminal at Gatwick Airport in London. It was commissioned in 1936. Kind of locally called the Beehive for its, kind of circular form. But it was one of the first terminals that did a few things. Prior to this, airplanes were kind of more in hangars. People kind of walked to the airplane and boarded the airplane. This is one of the first terminal buildings where people arrived at a building. There were facilities where you could check in. You had offerings like food and beverage. And as you can see here, there were these kind of 5 spokes that took you to one of 5 parked aircraft. And one of the inventions here too was one of the first telescoping jet bridges that took you to the airplane. So you could actually walk out to the airplane under cover, protected from the elements. Another thing you can pick up in this image too that we all know London does very well, even to this day, they built an underground tunnel that connects, you can see the train station kind of beyond. So there was a dedicated train station here. You could get off the train and walk through an underground tunnel and connect directly to the terminal. So this idea of linking transit and trains and planes, you could see in this early inception here back in 1936. Here back in New York, in Queens, New York, this is the original LaGuardia Airport Terminal, the Marine Terminal. The saying goes that LaGuardia, the mayor at the time, was flying home, landed in New York. It said, "Welcome to New York." He said, "I'm not in New York. I'm in Newark, New Jersey. We need to build," and that was the impetus for building a new terminal in New York City. So this is the first, similar to the Beehive we just showed you, a cylindrical building. On the left, you can see the kind of grand central dwell space that had check-in, lounge space. It was very comfortable. But this at that time in 1939 was dedicated to seaplanes. And that's why they called it the Marine Terminal. So airplanes landed on the bay. You departed, from a jet bridge, as you can see, connecting out to the water. And it was primarily, these were international flights, landing and departing from here. But servicing at the time was predominantly, waterfaring aircraft. And as you can imagine, as those became less popular, less utilized by airlines, slowly the terminal became, had to be adjusted and used in different ways.
Right.
Then into Chicago. Chicago is, again, you start to see a departure here now. Now, this is where we start to see a ramping up of the size of aircraft, right? We start to get into the 100 passenger range, 100 passengers per aircraft range. And so the distance parking between aircraft starts to get bigger and bigger. So wingtip to wingtip, the building needs to start to get longer and longer. And the idea here was, if you take those earlier ideas at there's a kind of body, if you will, that represents the main terminal where you process and check in. There are now these kind of legs or these fingers that are added to that main body. So you can see these kind of long corridors expressed coming towards the page on the image on the right. And so you walked from the processing area, you walked out to your gate. You were assisted by moving walkways to kind of alleviate those long walks. But you could see that idea of walking to your airplane starts to become, commonplace here at Chicago's O'Hare International in 1958. Not too short, long after that, Dulles International Airport, which is in Washington, D.C. Sorry, misspelling here on the title slide. But this is in 1962. And by Eero Saarinen, and a fabulous terminal that still stands today. And you can see the kind of grand concrete structure with its perimeter structure and the kind of concrete shell that drapes. So it creates this beautiful check-in hall that is unencumbered by columns. So it's a kind of single span space. You come in, you check in. But they revolutionized this idea. Their point of view is that people shouldn't have to walk as far as you saw in the previous image at Chicago O'Hare. And the idea at the time was revolutionary. So the idea is you checked in, got your ticket, and you took one of these what they called mobile lounges. You can see on the images on the two right-hand sides, and they connected directly to the terminal and then ferried you directly to your aircraft.
I've been in one of those once.
You've been on one, have you? Really? Yeah.
It's in Washington, isn't it? Not Chicago.
I apologize. Yeah, it looks like there's a typo on this slide. It should say Washington, D.C. Yeah, Washington has two airports. There's Reagan Airport and Dulles Airport, which is still in operation today, but they do not use the mobile lounges anymore. So they at the time they could accommodate the size of the aircraft, the amount of people that you were boarding on the aircraft. It could manage it very well. And it was very civil, it was a very kind of, a great experience, to not have to walk these long distances, and you could sit in this lounge and it took you directly to the front door of the aircraft. Again, you'll hear this saying over and over again, as airplanes got bigger and bigger and bigger, trying to board more and more people, it became highly inefficient. So the time it took to board the aircraft, they just couldn't do those kind of turnaround times any longer. And slowly they kind of became decommissioned as they built satellite terminals here. And eventually they built a rail system, an automated people mover. So an underground rail system that connects you from the terminal to satellite terminals where the aircraft are parked. But again, a kind of a great monumental piece of architecture by Eero Saarinen, who also did the TWA terminal at JFK, which many of us know. But in terms of the thinking, this was somewhat revolutionary. And you'll see today, it's a terminal people are now looking back at, and you'll see as a theme, as terminals get bigger and bigger and bigger, this idea of walking kilometers to get to your airplane is no longer fathomable. So people are rethinking this idea of, well, how do I get people back to the aircraft more immediately? So in response to that, this is eventually, for example, where Dulles went to a certain extent, but this is the airport in Atlanta. And when it was first marketed and first kind of brought onto the stage, it was this idea of a satellite terminal airport. So on the left-hand side, there was a kind of main building where you dropped off with your cars, where you did your processing. But there was an underground trail, an underground rail system that connected you to these satellite terminals. So the aircraft could all park highly efficiently. The buildings were very linear and simple. It eventually did cut down on walking distances. And this is what was to become, one of the busiest airports, and still is one of the busiest airports in the world. But you can see some of the great marketing on the bottom left, for example, describing this idea being whisked away by a train and then minimizing your walking distances. But again, this was in response to not only the increase in size of aircraft so they could park them more efficiently around the building, but also the growth in travel, the growth in airline travel. This is here starting in the mid 70s throughout the 80s in the US, kind of exponential growth in airline travel.
Okay.
1980, this is a building that we can take responsibility for. So this is a building designed by SOM. This is the dedicated Hajj terminal at the King Abdulaziz International Airport in Jeddah, opened in 1981. And they needed a facility that could cater to this, to the Hajj and to the pilgrimage throughout the year. And it was the idea that of a building that could take this surge of passengers that was not consistent throughout the year. So you have these kind of surges of passengers and visitors throughout the year, but create a kind of modern contemporary building that could service all of this. And I bring it up because architecturally and in terms of the typology, there are a few things that it did that were revolutionary at the time and hadn't done before. So this idea of a kind of high roof architectural structure that kind of sails above everything. In this case, it was a kind of tensile fabric structure that floated above what is an open air terminal. But the other thing you can see here are these pillars you see coming up with the round holes. Those are actually the air delivery system. So there is localized cooling at the kind of human level because the temperatures outside are extraordinary. So there was a need for cooling. But they do cool the spaces. And you'll see this is the first time that airports ever did this, about bringing services from below, having these air towers that then kind of cool a localized area, as opposed from bringing air from above and kind of shooting the air down. So this is the first that kind of incorporated services from a low level, letting a high roof kind of sail above, giving you flexibility below. It had everything, all of the modern conveniences. It had retail, it had shopping, dining, in addition to being open air, and many passive strategies. So the air can circulate through, the hot air rises through these conical structures, and it's a kind of an amazing environment. And so you can see the natural, follow-up to that. This is in Essex, England. This is the Stansted Airport, which opened in 1991, so within 10 years. But you can see that idea of this kind of beautiful modular high roof structure kind of floating above you. And this is by Foster and Partners. Glazing at the perimeter, you can see out, you can see to your aircraft, but this highly flexible footprint below. So the structural system allows this kind of modification over time, flexibility to adapt as things change. But you can also see this integration with the structure and the air delivery. So these big gray boxes are the air delivery, so delivering the kind of cooled air for the lower levels, again, coming from below and cooling these lower areas. And then in 1998, again, by Foster and Partners, this is the Hong Kong International Airport in Hong Kong. At its time was the largest airport in the world. And this is where you see that idea of that kind of high floating roof, but taken to a new scale, right? So this is a picture of the entrance. The building is more than 1 kilometer long. It has an internal rail that connects you from the head house to the further gates. And was really a machine in a sense of moving people, moving parts, and the idea of the machine-like qualities that expressed in the architecture. Here in San Francisco, not too far after that, was an international gateway to the east, based in San Francisco, California. Again, you see this evolution of these single high roof structures, large singular spans, creating these kind of free open plans below. Lots of natural daylight, and also the emergence of landscaping you start to see in the terminal here. And then in 2004, we'd say this is almost the culmination of that. This is the Beijing Capital Airport Terminal 3. It opened around the time that the Beijing Olympics were occurring. A large single roof terminal, vast in terms of its scale, but again, a kind of single monumental gateway to Beijing. That could process extraordinary amounts of people, but also needed a kind of people mover because of its great length that you would have to walk. And the last slide I leave on, this is at Changi International Airport Terminal 3. This is another SOM building, opened in 2007. the building itself was a kind of a finely tuned instrument that allowed, you know, the perfect amount of daylight, and these kind of operable louvers move throughout the day as the sun changes. But the thing we wanted to highlight is this idea of this landscaping, this greenery that you see in the building. It brought a kind of humanist point to the architecture and to the passenger experience. And more so, many of us who have traveled through Changi, through Singapore, we know they are now leading the world in terms of passenger experience and the type of experiences that you were afforded, whether it's a great passenger amenities, great processing, the latest technology in terms of, you know, screening passengers at passports or security, but also in terms of the opportunities for shopping, for dining. You can go outside into an outdoor garden, you can be in a butterfly garden, you can take in a show. So they've really, you know, kind of started to look inward and really focus on the passenger and what is the experience afforded to the passenger, and kind of taken that to a new level that we're not really seeing or hadn't seen around the world at this time. But now you're seeing everybody start to kind of move in this direction. And I left on that one because I think it's a good pivot point to talking about Bangalore T2.
I think all of us are waiting to see what you've done in Bangalore. But just before that, I'd just like to highlight that airports in Bangalore, in India, airports, people going to airports are always accompanied by either their family or their friends, or even if somebody arrives from another country or another destination, there's a huge bunch of people waiting to meet them, unlike what you see in other countries. And I think this would affect a design consideration that you have to have some kind of not just the passenger experience, as you pointed out, but also the visitor experience or the guys who come to see them off. And two, airports are basically a place of tension because it's a place of transition, it's a place of tension because somebody is leaving, you know, the movie trope of the long goodbye. It's always the goodbyes or welcomes are all both great events in our lives. So we're all waiting to see what you have done in Bangalore that is going to encompass both the garden experience as well as the idea, how do you deal with Indian crowds and how are you going to be able to give everybody a good time?
It's a great point, Naresh, because you know what is born out of frankly a security requirement, right? Because of the airports in India, from a security standpoint, if you don't have a ticket, you're not allowed in the building, which you're right is different from other places around the world. So what we've seen in our experience, what is born out of, frankly, a security requirement is create something kind of magical and fantastic that happens at the airport that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to create something unique and distinctive, but also serve a need that's now a need of the passengers in India to have that kind of space to accommodate those kinds of activities in a way that is enjoyable, but also a way that you can actually do it. It's protected, from the elements, for example. And so in our designs at Mumbai and here at Bangalore T2, that was very much at the forefront of our minds. We do spend a lot of time thinking about the processing of passengers inside the building, but there's a lot that happens before you even get to the airport in terms of how people use it. And I think even at Bangalore T1, I have a slide later in the show, but what BIL has done at Bangalore T1 has been fantastic, not only in terms of the expansion, but if you've been there lately, they've built this, what they call the quad, right in front of the terminal. And it's a response directly to what you're talking. And I think the building always had accommodations in front of the building. It had some food and beverage offerings. But now they've taken that and made it a true destination. And there's shopping, there's dining. And for what I understand in the times I've been there, when we're working at the airport, that's where we now have our dinner. We go to the quad and we have a meal, and we kind of enjoy our time with our colleagues. And but now I think it's becoming a destination even within the broader catchment of Bangalore. People are coming on the weekends. Travelers, like you said, with their families are lingering a little longer, maybe taking time to have a meal before they take off, or as you welcome your family after a long flight. It's a place where you can
Since it's
enjoy
also
yourselves.
7, it's also becoming the destination for many after parties. So it's not that nobody's leaving or coming, but every after party gets moved there because it's open up. It's open 24/7.
And I think what's made it successful, in addition to, I'm sure there's been lots of thought about the commercial aspects and all of this, but the thing I find the most striking, having spent lots of time in Bangalore, is that even as a visitor, when going to the city center, you long for a place that is pedestrian accessible, that you can walk and free. And I think what they've created there at the airport is a place where you're not encumbered by cars. You can roam freely and not be concerned with traffic and vehicles. So I think that's one of the keys to their success so far.
So would you like to share the design of the Bangalore terminal at this point?
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Let me bring up my screen. I start with this statement, an innovative and sustainable airport delivering the most memorable and meaningful garden experience in the world. And this was a statement crafted by the entire project team with BIL, with their stakeholders, the architects, landscape architects, the engineers. We all committed to this at the beginning of the project. This was the mantra that kind of carried through the whole project. And it established the ambition of the terminal, and it established the ambition of the design, but as a collective as well, it established what we thought what we would all kind of work towards in terms of this experience, this idea of a garden experience, and that it's highly sustainable, and it's kind of a new take on the airport terminal. So you could see maybe this becomes the next natural progression in that history of airport terminals that I showed you. And from the beginning, this was a true reflection of the history of Bangalore as the Garden City. And we spent a lot of time kind of embracing that and understanding what that meant, visiting places like the Lawball Garden, the beautiful, tree-lined parks that the city is known for, fantastic places like City Market. And what we heard interesting in the beginning too is not only was it, the Garden City, but time and time again, we spoke to people who've grown up in the city and lived, spent a lifetime in the city, and remembered fondly as a child or growing up in the city this idea of beautiful tree-lined streets, verdant, kind of driveways, a city that was truly kind of immersed in nature. And like many cities around the world, through rapid urban growth, a lot of this is kind of cast to the wayside, and we see this around the world. Bangalore is just one of many cities around the world that is losing the natural elements of the city. And so the charge here was to say, could we create an airport terminal that becomes a model? So not only an airport, but a new civic structure in Bangalore that becomes a model for not only representing what the city was and is known for, but could it be a model for responsible development, for sustainable growth, for what a kind of landscape architecture could be? So the idea of the airport, it had a functional requirement, it had to meet passenger, demands, new flight forecasts, all these, great things that it has to do. But symbolically, it represented more for the city of Bangalore, and that's our hope and aspiration of what the terminal could be. And a bit about the design. Again, the focus was this idea of the passenger experience and this connection to nature. Was really at the root of what the design is about. And here you see an early image on approach. So you're kind of approaching the building. The terminal is kind of set beyond there. You can see it kind of glowing, but really foregrounded by a rich, verdant landscape setting that people can occupy in different ways and become a kind of destination. So even if you're not traveling, even if you're not flying, it becomes a place that you'd like to visit with your family, with your children, and spend the day or spend a weekend kind of exploring these parks that'll be designed in front of the terminal. A bit of the kind of groundwork, this is an aerial view. In the bottom right-hand side of the page, you can see about half of the existing Terminal 1. So that's the kind of expansion that everybody knows today. Across the way, you can see the low building there is the existing Taj Hotel. And then so to the left of the page is the new, would be a standalone, Terminal 2, which will be built to supplement the increasing, air traffic. You can also see on the, further to the right of the page, which many know now is now in operation, is the new southern runway, which has been completed. So this image kind of depicts all of that. The new terminal will serve, when it opens, about 25 million passengers, and it'll be built in 2 phases. So what you're seeing here is phase 1, which is essentially about half of the building. So there'll be about another half that comes mirrored to the south side. So the kind of area that's vacant over here, basically this plan will get mirrored, and you'll see the second half there when the growth and the demand comes into play. So this drawing here, you can see it in plan in red, which is what will be phase 1 and open first, and then to the south you have the phase 2. There's a kind of parking facilities, ground transportation that'll come in the forecourt, and then you'll see later on a great kind of park and lagoon, a water feature that becomes a prominent feature in the forecourt of the building. And then there's the roadways, departures roadways that kind of surround this forecourt. The drop-offs happen kind of in the front of the building here, and you can see the Terminal 1 just to the top of the page. So just to give a bit of orientation to the new plan. And so the idea of the building was that it's, from a planning standpoint, it's actually a very simple, highly efficient building. It's very modular, very repeatable. When they do expand into phase 2, they can do that very simply without having to move many elements, and it can be done very kind of economically, frankly. And the idea here, though, is that when it does open, that it feels complete. So most people, when they come to Terminal 2, when it does open, may not even know that there's a whole second half that is yet to come. And that was part of the design, to make it feel complete, to feel like there was a full passenger experience on day 1. And so just to kind of break that down, in blue, this very simple rectangle is where check-in, security, immigration, the main retail body is housed. And what we did is we took in red, which are the departure gates. Those are the gate lounges where you wait to board your aircraft before you get onto the jet bridges and ultimately to the aircraft. This simple move where that is typically attached to the body of the building, we pull that apart. Right, so the body of the building can be planned to the check-in, what that needs to be, the security, exactly what it needs to be, in the retail. And then the gate lounges likewise can all be planned exactly to the functionality, what they need to be. But by pulling it apart, we create this kind of extraordinary experience, what we call the forest belt, highlighted in green here. And it is an outdoor landscape environment that'll be fully planted and vegetated. And it is an environment that everybody, actually, I'm going to go back, has to cross through. So if you can see these bridge-like elements here, once you've gone through retail and to get to the gates, you actually go outside through a protective covering and actually walk through this outdoor landscape environment. So everybody will experience landscape inside the building, outside the building. So from the moment you drop off in your car, go through check-in, cross through to the gates, get on your airplane, it'll be this end-to-end experience of landscape. If you take the roof off, you can see some of the components. So for example, Naresh, to your question, in the foreground here, we've given very generous space. Once you've dropped off here, there's a very deep forecourt here that is under the high roof. So the high roof will kind of come out over that space. You'll be under the roof, under protection. And there's landscape zones in the front there where you can sit, you can have a coffee, have a meal, even at the departures level before people kind of make their way into the building here. So the main body here is the check-in hall, security, and then the retail hall afterwards. The building will also be international and domestic, so there's a split that happens after check-in, but everybody will be given this experience for landscape. And so a view again of kind of what that looks like, head on to the building. And then once you go inside, the idea of landscape, you'll see, kind of manifests itself in many different ways. Sometimes it's suspended from the ceiling, sometimes it's a garden in the floor, sometimes it's an external garden that you kind of traverse through. In addition to that, we've set up the views and the glazing in such a way that you are always also looking outside to landscape. So even in the check-in hall, which you're seeing here, as you're checking in, the backdrop is that fabulous forest belt that I just described. And so you always have a visual and kind of physical connection to the landscape elements. And the idea is, we think it starts to kind of bring down those stress levels. It kind of creates a calming environment. And it's a multi-sensory environment. So there's plantings, there's landscaping, so you'll smell flowers. There are significant water features that you'll see throughout the building, so you can hear water that'll be very soothing. The materials we've even chosen too, it's the architecture here is in support of this landscape architecture. So in lieu of a kind of grand, let's say formal gesture for the building that you see a lot in airport terminals, the architecture is quiet and simple and organized. But through the layering, for example, of what we're using is natural bamboo to clad the columns in the ceiling. It'll filter light down through these spaces, create very kind of warm materials, but also very natural and sustainable materials. We think it'll create a kind of total, landscape environment. So it's the landscape, the architecture, all working together to create this kind of, memorable experience. Others examples, this is a lounge we've provided. So portions of the passengers will be served by bus gates. So even for the bus gate passengers who descend down to a bus gate, many of us who have gone through bus gates, they're not always the most pleasurable experience. Sometimes they're in the basement, sometimes there's no daylight. We've kind of turned that on its head. And so passengers in the bus gates, which are to the right-hand side of the image, they can actually walk outside to these verdant gardens. There'll be cafes, seating areas, places you can finish up some work before you get on your airplane, and other amenities that'll be provided. So every experience also has been thought about. So there is no kind of second-class experience in the building, if you will. So even bus gates, bus passengers will find an extraordinary experience tied to landscape. So that gives you, I think, a broad overview of the design and the kind of conceptual thinking behind this landscape concept.
Are all these gardens that you mentioned accessible to the general public, or only are they only accessible to once you're a bona fide passenger?
So it's a bit of a mix, Naresh. We try to, as much as possible, at kind of main events, if you will, throughout the passenger experience. As you know, you go through check-in, you have security, immigration, retail. There's a kind of sequence of events. And one of the things that we did is to make that journey kind of broken down, that there's moments of surprise as you go. So the journey itself doesn't feel long at all, because you've had these moments of delight, if you will. So for example, after security, there's going to be what we're calling a kind of orientation garden, and it'll have these kind of fantastic structures and water. But it's that moment after security, you've taken your shoes off in the US, you've taken your bag off in this place, you're trying to rush to get to your flight, or trying to, meet your family. And we've tried to make it a civilized space. So you're in a garden, being able to gather your things, put your, close your bag, and kind of figure out where you are, understand your next steps, and tried to make it a very civilized experience. So for example, that's a landscape moment right after security. There's other moments in the retail, for example, that we'll be programming where you can actually take a picnic in a garden that's inside the terminal, if you have the time. There are other moments where you can explore outside, but we did have to curate it very specifically. So from a security standpoint, from an operation standpoint, you can't just have people freely roaming all these gardens. So they are controlled.
What about the garden in front of the parking lot?
That'll be accessible. Yeah, that'll be made accessible to the public. So it'll be a public amenity that anybody can come, and it'll be parks, a lagoon. There'll be retail out there, like what they've done at the BIL Quad at T1. So that idea will be kind of taken and expanded to the forecourt in front of T2.
Many of our listeners today and viewers today, I think, are architects and technical guys and engineers. Would you like to tell us a little more about the engineering challenges? I also understand that this is one of the first completely BIM integrated design that for any building, which is like involves a 100% integration of BIM technologies, both in the design as well as in the construction and fabrication. And most of it is done in steel. Would you like to explain to us how this finally, all of us, a lot of architects are a little afraid of BIM still. So how can we remove that little trepidation when it comes to using this kind of stuff, software? Yeah.
So yes, the project was done, from start to through construction. Has been a BIM process, and for this project in particular, we used Autodesk's platform Revit, and that was the platform used from the design phases through the later documentation phases that we did, the detailed design of the building. But not only the design, the structural systems, the mechanical systems, the baggage systems, IT systems. So kind of everything, all the different disciplines and components that go into the machine of the building, if you will, was all documented and constructed and coordinated in Revit. Ultimately, then that was passed on to Larsen and Toubro, who was the L&T. They were the successful bidder for the project. So now they've taken that process through in BIM, continuing in Revit, and I think they have other softwares that they use to complement the process as well. But yes, that's even through construction, that has been the main platform. And it does have its challenges, for this building type. It's not uncommon to hear about buildings that have been fully coordinated in BIM, but at this scale, part of it is just data management. It's a lot of it comes down to that, managing files, managing data, but also having accessible. So many portions of the model were in the cloud on 360, so that many parties from BIL side, the client side, from our consultants, our side, we can be in different locations, but also still fully coordinate the model. And BIL also had their own in-house team of experts, in addition to every individual consultant. And so collectively, we were able to do this, and it took everyone to kind of get that through and find ways to work in the models. On the screen, you can see a part of that Revit model. This is specifically the structural components of the model. So everything else is turned off, the mechanical systems, the architecture. So you're just seeing the bones, if you will, of the building, the structural systems. And the building is very straightforward. When you kind of peel back the layers, the structure of the building is very economical. It's a very straightforward structural system. And this is a kind of prototypical section through the building. But everything from the ground up through the departures levels, there's about 3 main levels. There's an arrivals level, a mezzanine, and then a departures level. And one of the reasons we did that is on departures, for example, there's very little to no level changes. In some airports, for example, you have to go up or down as you transition through. So on departures and arrivals, you have a kind of constant level walk, either to your gate or from your gate to the arrivals. So those first 3 levels in red are the main primary structural system, including the foundations of the building. And then everything from the red zone up, so that's the departures level, the columns and the roof, everything in blue is a lightweight steel system. So it is a hybrid system, but the prominent, kind of roof and columns that you see are all in steel. So this is a diagram explaining that kind of arrangement. So you have a structural system for the main roof in blue. The yellow zone was that kind of orientation garden I was describing, where you kind of, after security, it opens up a bit there. The spans are a little bit more, so we have a different system there. And then lining the perimeter is also a very simple system in red, defining the gate lounges. And so those 2 systems, basically it breaks down in terms of steel. There's essentially 2 main structural systems. On the right-hand side is what defines the main processor spaces, like check-in and retail and security. The structure is based on a column placement every 18 meters. which allows the spans to be very economical. The steel members can be very thin, but still gives you the flexibility and openness that the airport terminal needs from a planning standpoint. And then in the gate lounges, we went to a kind of 21-meter long span by 9-meter in the short direction. And that is a clear span at the gate lounges. So where the gates are, where you're boarding, there are no columns. You can see where you're going. You can see the gates. But again, but a very kind of economical, simple span. And the idea is that the building is highly modular. So from a construction standpoint, they can build it very quickly. The modules are kind of easy to maintain. It was through the design of that, again, it allowed us to focus on the detailing, allowed us to kind of, really carefully think about the materials, the intersections, and the detailing of that. And one of the things we really focused on too is all of this is designed with steel that can be fabricated and sourced in India. So none of this is coming from abroad. So it could all be done locally. And that allowed us also to keep, the economies of the building kind of in check, but also allowed us to kind of work very closely on the detailing. One of the key things you'll see in the columns, and I have some images later too, is that it's not a solid column that you typically see. So it's not a solid concrete column or a kind of a massive steel column. It's actually, each column is 4 smaller columns that are bundled together. And the idea is that there is light that comes through the columns. And it supported this idea of the terminal being something that you might see in a garden, like a kind of garden pavilion, and it's very light and airy. So the steel design supports that as well. These are some of the details for the concourses and the gate lounges, which was a mix of concrete columns and steel trusses. But that process also here, these are images of the building at both phases, but this is in a wind tunnel testing facility. So you often see, wind tunnels done for super, high-rise buildings to understand, because the majority of the structural design is usually for wind and the forces of the wind. But many times you do a similar, because you have this low, building typology. We still do a wind tunnel testing because it allows us, on one hand, to optimize the structure and really understand what the wind forces will be, so we can make the sizing, more tuned and more economical. But in some cases too, for example, I talked about the main roof coming out over the departures level. It's an exterior roof, and it does actually take a lot of uplift from the wind, and so we had to, kind of make sure that we paid specific attention to that. So even a building of this scale, we put through the wind tunnel, and so these are images literally from the testing facility. And then these are some of the documents from our structural engineers of how those steel components came together. You can see the plan on the top here, those 4 columns that create one column that are then kind of bundled. And it was this idea of like bamboo, kind of bundling bamboo together, not only in the steel, but also in the cladding eventually, which was bamboo as well. And our process is we think about everything. Not only was it locally sourced, but how was it fabricated? Ultimately, how can it be shipped? So the columns and what we call the node at the top were all fabricated in a shop. That will kind of enhance the quality and the detailing and the welding that happens. It can then be brought to the site, erected very quickly, and then all the connections can be simply made on the site. And these are drawings as well from our documentation where we worked with L&T in helping develop all these kind of connection points. Many of it was repeatable, but in some cases you had unique conditions. And so a lot of this was modeled in BIM to make sure we captured all the different occurrences that happen in the steel connections. And then these are some of the photos. The building is under construction, well underway. And so you can see how a lot of this is coming out, and we've been very proud and happy with the quality. You can see the steel, steel craftsmanship is at a very high level, and all those connections and everything were very thought through. And so we're essentially, because of BIM and the process and the thoroughness, we're getting what we thought we were going to get, and what we drew. And then another picture kind of zooming back, and here you start to get a sense of the scale. That's one of the things as an architect working on this typology is we spend time looking at these plans and drawings and renderings, but it's finally when you start to see it come alive, you can see a person on the bottom left of the image or kind of in the middle. So you get a sense of the immense scale of the building as you see here.
Yeah, at the beginning of the presentation, Peter, that you also mentioned that the airport is a sustainable airport. And how is this sustainability? Because now, a lot of people are accused of doing greenwashing for their buildings as the replacement for whitewashing over what we used to call whitewashing earlier. Have you managed to embed the concept of sustainability both in the design as well as in the concept of material selection? You also mentioned local sourcing as an important thing for the structural system. How is that reflected also in the other materials, and how is it reflected in our state and our culture in particular?
That's a great question, Naresh, and I can point to a couple examples here. And it for a building of this scale, which from an energy standpoint, as an example, they do take tremendous amounts of energy, and a lot of it is the things that you don't see in the building. So it's the systems that are required to keep the building moving, the baggage handling systems, the mechanical systems, the lighting. They create extraordinary amounts of energy and require extraordinary amounts of energy to keep running. And so it takes thinking at all levels. You have to be thinking about the systems, the materials, the lighting. All of that comes together to even start to chip away, at making this, highly sustainable building. I would say, though, if you take a step back, first and foremost, the most important thing is when you start the project. We had that mantra that I said at the beginning, for this to be one of the most sustainable buildings in the world. It takes everybody at the table agreeing and being on the same page with this. And I have to commend BIL, because from the beginning, this was part of their aspiration, was to have this be a truly sustainable building. And so having clients, who support that, and as part of their, not only their business, but part of their thinking as well, is a key part of that. And I think as architects, all of us, we have an opportunity to make important impacts on the world. The impact of buildings on our built environment in terms of carbon is significant, and we can make a change, and we can help reduce the negative impacts of climate change if we are all dedicated to this cause. And so as a firm, it's something that as SOM we are highly focused on in our buildings. In this, we had a wonderful partner with BIL and all of our consultants in kind of realizing that, and it afforded us the opportunity to really think about this at all levels. From a pragmatic standpoint, in this building, we were balancing a lot of things, the size of the building, the systems, but also this idea of housing landscaping. How do you manage that in a sustainable way that was not detrimental to the water sources, for example, or didn't put too much energy into the building in terms of sustaining them. But one of the key ideas of the landscaping was that it was truly sustainable, not necessarily in the kind of overarching kind of performance standpoint, but that it was not a system of plants that they had to come in and kind of take in and out every so often, let's say. So the majority of the planting that you see, the selection of the plants, for example, were plants that we could know would be sustainable in these different types of environments. Some of them are indoors, some of them are outdoors. And so the careful selection of the plant species, for example, was done in a way that would ensure it could actually grow. We tuned the skylights of the building and organized the skylights so that there was always natural daylight where there is natural landscaping. So there's no artificial grow lights, for example, that are required to sustain the plants, which use a tremendous amount of energy. And then from a water standpoint, we made sure that the plants were using as much native planting as possible, but plants that would not require as much water, so we can use drip irrigation and efficient water. But coupled with that, we also, the focus on water was tremendous. So we were collecting water from all the roof surfaces of the building and also the surrounding site. And we're going to be reusing most of that water for potable water, but also to support all the landscaping. So the landscaping is not now putting an additional load on the water source. It's a net zero water supply for all of the landscaping. So it's being done. It'll be a fantastic passenger experience, but not at the not at the detriment to the environment. Architecturally, I can bring up. I have images for all these, but I want to focus maybe on the architectural materials. Let me just share my screen. So the focus on this idea of a garden terminal, like I said earlier, there was an idea that the architecture supported this concept, and the two, worked in harmony to create this unique environment. And part of doing that was to move away from this idea of, many of us have traveled through airports where you see lots of glass, lots of stainless steel, lots of white stone, white ceilings, all for good reason. We've all done these buildings and understand why. But they do create a kind of environment where there's a bit of placelessness. You could be anywhere in the world in some of these terminals. And there's an idea here to turn that when you land in Bangalore, when you depart from Bangalore, that you're in Bangalore and not somewhere else in the world. And to support that, when we look to the interiors, not only that talked about the steel and locally sourcing the steel, but a lot of the interior environments which we designed, the wall cladding, the ceilings, the floors, the furniture, we turn to looking as many natural materials and locally sourced materials as possible. So some examples, for example, on this image, this beautiful mock-up we did at the site was locally cast bricks. And it's a very commonplace material. You see it used throughout India, but very commonly it's typically the supporting material. You don't, with rare occurrences or it's exceptions. It's not necessarily the primary architectural expression. Although in southern India we did see a lot of that kind of in the traditional architecture. But a lot of the wall cladding inside will use these bricks, and we've looked at the patterning of the brick to create these kind of beautiful plays on light and shadow, and there'll be kind of these great, surfaces that have a lot of texture and kind of grain to them as you walk through the building. The floorings will use natural stones, locally sourced natural stones, and the image on the bottom left is the bamboo cladding that we're going to use for the majority of the columns and the ceilings. And it's actually reconstituted bamboo. They call it engineered bamboo. So it uses raw bamboo. It's kind of finely cut and then essentially reconstituted into any shape you can actually want. You can be square, rectangular, and in this case we're creating these kind of cylinders that create these kind of bamboo rods, if you will. And so you see some images. We've been working with the manufacturers and working on the detailing. And some of the things that we liked about it is that it's truly a renewable source of materials. So bamboo is a naturally growing renewable source of materials. So we're not having to take down lots of trees, for example, or use lots of metals or other materials. It's a very natural material. But it's also very strong. It has lots of great structural capabilities. So for example, in the ceilings, as you can see here, for a 3 by 3 meter panel, which that is, it's actually layered in about 3 layers, kind of cross-laminated with openings so the light can filter through it. But there's only 4 points of support, so it's all self-supporting, and so it's very structurally rigid as well. And all the connections also are really simple. They can be done by hand with very simple tools. All this can be very simply assembled and put together and put in place, but create this kind of very beautiful expression. So that allowed us to kind of look at the craftsmanship of that, details of how 2 poles come together, for example, on the left. We worked on the kind of material finishes, the stains, things like that, making sure that it could still be maintainable. It is an airport, so you have lots of people coming around. So to make sure that it could be maintained and cleaned and things like that, but also tuning the right color for these interior environments. And then in our drawings and details, we looked at everything. How do you incorporate lighting in this? How does it meet the ground? So on the bottom left, we have this beautiful steel plate that'll sit about 200 millimeters off the floor. So when people have baggage carts and the cleaning operations come through the building, they're not banging into these beautiful bamboo poles, for example. But then you can see on the top left, for example, there's this intricate weaving and lamination and weaving of the bamboo that happens to lightly conceal the steel. So when it's done, you still see the steel. It's kind of subtly expressed, but you also see it with this kind of beautiful bamboo expressed. And one of the things that we've found very successful at these large scale projects is to do full scale mock-ups. So on the left-hand side is a full-scale mock-up of one of those 18 meter by 18 meter bays. It has the steel, it has the bamboo, some of the brick cladding, some of the landscape elements too that we were testing out. And so this allowed us to, further refine the details, understand the materials, work with the contractors and craftsmen, and really understand how this would all come together. And it was a really effective way to kind of ensure the detailing was there, but also the process and quality, could be maintained.
I think we're coming to the end of our conversation, but before you complete your presentation, can you also talk about a little bit about the landscaping strategy as well as your approach to retail and commercial spaces from a viewpoint of trying to create a destination for a new retail destination for Bangalore, and I think we can wind up after that.
Fantastic. I'd love to show you some of the studies we did. Let me bring up my screen. So one of the things to bring all of this together, it took a lot of thinking and a lot of actual science. And there's at this scale, there's not many examples that you could point to of how do you bring in these kind of landscape environments to the interiors. That's not a building that's dedicated to that. So this is not a greenhouse. It's not a kind of a ecological center that's established around landscaping and only that. This is an airport first and foremost that has this beautiful landscaping backdrop. And so we worked very closely with our landscape architect, which is Grant and Associates, based out of the UK. They've done many fantastic projects around the world, in collaboration with our lighting designers, irrigation specialists, our structural engineers. It all had to kind of come together. And we actually used BIM and other softwares like Rhino, Radiance, other softwares that we started to pull together to actually test and model what we think was going to happen. And these are some screenshots of these models that we built. They're kind of crude. They don't have all the elements, but one of the things we had to work very carefully on is a lot of these lighting softwares, there's no plugin for landscape, right? There's no model that you can say, here's a shrub and let's put it in and let's understand the daylighting. And so we actually had to create our own models that simulated the effect of plantings, if you will. And so we developed some scripts and some tools that allowed us to kind of modulate that and then work with the landscape consultants as they started to hone in on the species selection and the plant selection. We could start to kind of tune the openness, the size, and then use that as a way to start testing daylighting. So these are screenshots from some of these models that we created. Again, very crude, but they allowed us to start testing the amount of daylight that we were receiving, how much the plant was actually seeing in terms of daylight, and also how much was being filtered through and still daylighting the public spaces. So a lot of this had to be invented. It didn't exist. It wasn't a kind of a plant software that we could go out or at least that we could find. And so there was a lot of invention and kind of great collaboration that happened here to solve and kind of figure out how these would work. And then these are the the kind of readouts of that. And so we had different points in time where we could understand the daylighting throughout the year, and we did it throughout points of day, times of the day. And we also had to do it laterally too. We did it 1 meter off the floor, 3 meters off the floor, 12 meters off the floor. So we understand the levels of daylighting that you're achieving, throughout the building, not only in a plan standpoint, but also sectionally. So these are some great studies about that. And then on the retail front, let me bring that up. Again, the BIL had a kind of great group behind the retail thinking. They're kind of always at the cutting edge of retail and thinking about that. But it started, so this is thinking about inside the building first, where we have international and domestic. So there's a kind of split between the two sides, if you will, in terms of passenger, being served. And but we started with these kind of blocking diagrams, and BIL had kind of come to the table with some of our retail consultants and ourselves, and understanding the mix of offerings. So there'd be a duty free, there'd be luxury shopping, high street, a kind of food village, casual dining. so that from an experience standpoint, there's going to be a great mix of offerings that'll be afforded to the passengers coming through here. So kind of, great experience in terms of options. What we did then from a planning standpoint as well is started to marry that with, one was an idea of convenience. And, many people we spoke to early on, speak fondly about Terminal 1, not only in terms of the experience, but also the ability to move quickly in and out of that building. And one of the key things we did when we drew, this building's gonna be significantly bigger, but we wanted to make sure that that immediacy and that convenience of getting to your gate was not lost. So as we did retail plans, we were simultaneously studying the paths that passengers would take, how long it would take to get to certain gates throughout the day. And that started to, inform the plan. And so we would adjust paths and where stores were located and where exits were located, to meet not only the commercial requirements, but also to make sure passengers weren't traveling such great distances to get to their gate. And these were, kind of diagrams we did that started to bring that all together. So how do you create the right footfall in front of shops, keep the walking distances low, have wayfinding still be very intuitive so people aren't getting lost. So it's not this model where you are kind of spun around and put in the middle of retail and figure out your own way. That it's still very intuitive, flows through the spaces. But then again, to also balance with garden experience. So these are diagrams we did where we would kind of evaluate all these things together inside the building. And then outside the building, I use a picture of the quad at T1, and I think this is a great, for me, I think embodies the spirit of what BIL's done at the quad. And like you said, Naresh, the kind of after party place. You can come with your family, have a meal, grab a drink, but it's not uncommon to come here, even when you land, to arrive and see a fully attended, concert happening in the center at the airport, immediately in front of the building. And there's a great energy there and, a lot of excitement. And so in the forecourt, we don't have any drawings to share at the moment, but in the forecourt of the new T2, you can expect this, but at a kind of, a larger scale, a publicly accessible place that has entertainment and shopping, gardens that you can explore, and a real fabulous kind of outdoor environment, not dissimilar to the quad.
That's great. I think we're all going to, we're all waiting for this to open. When is it going to open now, given has it been affected by the COVID, the date of opening has been affected by the crisis? Or is it on track?
The opening date has been pushed out because of COVID. I believe not as much as you would expect. So I think they've done a great job of kind of recuperating. The construction did slow down obviously during the pandemic, but now as we speak are kind of back at it, and construction is ramping back up again. And we hope within by the end of the year or next year phase 1 will be open, so everyone will be able to see everything come to life that we showed you here. And something we're very proud of and excited to see unveiled to the city of Bangalore.
Okay, I think we're all looking forward to the enhancement of the flying experience. And I for one, I'm actually getting nostalgic about missing a fasten the seatbelt sign, because I haven't been on an aeroplane for 8 months, and I was but we all hope that this will come out great, and I think what you've shown us gives us a lot of hope that this will be one of the new trend-setting airports of the world. Thank you so much, Peter, for a great talk, and I think we all learned a lot today. And I hope to see you soon in person too.
Thank you, Naresh. Appreciate it. This has been a great chat. And yes, when the skies open again, we hope to connect in Bangalore. So great to talk to you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to our eminent speakers for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us this evening. A special thanks to our title sponsor, Armstrong Ceiling Solutions. We thank our audience that has shown support and tuned in to this evening. To know more about our upcoming events, follow us on Instagram at iDAC Expo. Until we meet again, stay safe. Thank you.